as this AU contingent is concerned, there's just a few thousand, and from what I've been hearing, all they are managing to do is to keep the transitional federal government in place in Badoa, and if they were not there, the government would collapse imminently. In fact, the departure of the Ethiopians could bring that about much more sooner than later. What would happen if Al-Shabaab took control? What would happen if the project that began and was almost completed in 2006 was completed this time?
This issue of Somalia, unless the international community recognizes and acknowledges that it is an international issue, Somalia is going back to the dark ages.
Yeah. Al-Shabaab, all the talk was that they were an offshoot from the Islamic Courts Union, that they were part of the Islamic Courts Union. Do they still remain within the ambit of control of the ICU, or are they now, to all extents and purposes, a separate group that is not being controlled by them? And if that is the case, what does that do for the peace process?
It is now up to the international community to look up at new versions of conflict resolution. Why can't the international community, all the decision makers, all the stakeholders, why can't they sit down and say, who are these people? What do Somalians want? Can we try these people? Because it is on record that even the international community have spoken and talked to bad guys before, and it has worked out for the positive. I think that it is important and high time the international community start listening to what Somalians want.
I just want to say that the Al-Shabaab is an organization which is well known. Clearly, their mandate is clear. They want to rule Somalia by Sharia law. They've made that absolutely clear. But in saying that, they're respected by the Islamic courts and the clerics, and I think we have to respect them because they control the vast percentage of that country.
Yeah, but Johnson, my main question was whether they remain within the ambit of the ICU, or whether, as you've just described, and it may be a nuance, but I think it's an interesting one, whether it is the Islamic Courts Union which has to learn to respect them.
Well, I think the Islamic courts have to respect them simply because they are a very large force. Clearly, they control vast amounts of the country in addition to what the Islamic clerics themselves control. But they've made it very, very clear that they will not stop. And of course, they would not negotiate with the government at all. So despite the Djibouti process, which we know has been operating, they're not prepared to engage with that process in itself. So that's where the problem lies.
So Ayub Muzay, does that make the Djibouti process worthless in as much as the Al-Shabaab are not willing to engage with that?
I don't think so. I still think that the yardsticks or the resolution reached in the Djibouti arrangement are still valid, and they can work on this matter. And I could say at the moment, like my colleague just said, that Al-Shabaab and some other group called Sunat al-Jamaa, they are people that cannot be ignored at the moment. Remember that Somalia is a Muslim country, and those people are playing on what Somalians want, the religious issue. Remember, we have got some countries in the world which are Islamic countries. They've got Sharia. They seem to be working for them.
You see,
whatever reason, I don't know why they can't.
I mean, Shohab, if I can just jump in there quickly. The Al-Shabaab clearly, their brand of democracy or their brand of Sharia is yet to be determined. But for the areas that they do control, what we have seen is that we do not find anarchy, which is quite prevalent in areas that the government controls, current government controls. So for that reason alone, it's even more problematic when such a large group that controls such a huge percentage of the country has been branded by the United States as terrorists. So it makes it even far complex when the major powers of the world do not even aspire or respect that organization. So it's very problematic for Somalia as a whole.
Well, it seems very problematic, and Mr. Johnson, the fact of the matter is that, as you have stipulated, as is on record elsewhere, Al-Shabaab and Sunat al-Jamaa are controlling huge swathes of this country. They are powerful forces. What do they need from Abdullahi Yusuf, the ex-president? What do they need from current president, Mr. Madobe? What is it that they can bring to the table that would be tempting to them?
Well, I think it's the other way around, because the present government that you're talking about, Mr. President Yusuf's government, Prime Minister Yusuf and Prime Minister Hussein's government, they do not control large swathes of the country. The people who control large swathes of the country, they are the ones who should call the shots.
Right, that's exactly my point. See, what I'm trying to say is, why would al-Shabaab want to negotiate with them? There doesn't seem to be any incentive for them to negotiate. It seems that through force of arms, very soon from now, they're going to control the entirety of the Federal Republic of Somalia, bar Puntland, which has gone its own way, and Somaliland. They're going to actually control the government. So why do they need to negotiate?
Well, for legitimacy, for their rule to be endorsed and respected, for that reason alone. But beyond that, they may go it alone. They may say, well, we don't need anyone. But you cannot work in isolation. I mean, clearly the world has shown us today that you need to work with others. And they have got to find a formula or some mechanism for the people like the United States, the United Nations, the African Union, and some of their neighbors respecting them enough for them to be able to rule that land, because clearly, more than likely, they are the future leaders of that country, based on what we're seeing currently.
Why should al-Shabaab concern itself with the question of legitimacy, as I.O. Johnson was saying?
I think that most of these self-styled people who are claiming to legitimacy, who the international community calls self-styled, but these are the people who have kind of struck a chord with the local people. Why can't the international community sit down and say, what is it that is making these people attracted to these people? Why are these people trying to legitimize themselves? What is in them that we can learn? What do they have that we can show them, or that we can learn from them as the international community, and incorporate it into what we could call our modern way of life? And this is what is lacking in this whole peace process.
Well, don't you think, Mr. Muzey, that what is actually lacking in this whole peace process is that Somalis can't sit down with other Somalis and recognize what it is that they have in common with each other? Never mind what they have in common with the rest of humanity outside Somalia. In his resignation speech, Mr. Abdullahi Yusuf, the former president, said that there were three things that he felt he'd failed on. One of them was that he hadn't been able to bring Somalis together. Why?
The Somali people have got the way they have been doing their things. Now, when we looked at modernity, we look at a situation that it has not been possible for them to work on international standards. But when they have come with their own version of administration or their own version of government, then we slam them down. I'm not saying that I advocate for violence, but I'm saying that there are examples that are vivid and open, whereby for a certain period of time, there are certain people, Somalians, who were in charge of that country, and there was relative peace.
With the coming to power of Barack Obama in the United States in a fortnight's time, do you expect there to be a greater focus from the United States on Africa and on this region? Yes or no?
I think there will be a massive influence. I'm hoping that President Obama, or President-elect Obama, actually focuses his attention on Somalia, focuses on the African continent, because we've got to be able to eradicate and address the issue of poverty, inequality and justice, which is not available for large numbers of our people on that continent.